Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Valeri, and I am the director of the John C. Danforth Center on Religion and Politics. And on behalf of everyone at the center, I welcome you, those here in Graham Chapel and those watching on live stream, to this Danforth Dialogues event, Realistic Hope, American Democracy in the 2024 Election. A quick word about us in the center. The center brings together scholars who study various intersections of religion and politics as they have shaped America's history and our present situation. An academic unit of Washington University, it is designed to nourish scholarship on and foster a pluralistic and democratic public discourse. This evening's event, Realistic Hope, sparked by the upcoming election, affords us another opportunity to model civil conversation as we explore issues that transcend partisan positioning. This center and the Danforth Dialogues are named in honor of John C. Danforth, United States Senator from Missouri and Ambassador to the United Nations. We are pleased that Senator Danforth is here tonight, and I invite you to join me in thanking him and his wife, Sally, for their leadership in the establishment of the center and for the generosity of the Danforth Foundation. I would also like to recognize the staff of the center who have worked very diligently to put together tonight's event. Deborah Kennard, Sherry Pena, and especially our event specialist, Hannah Pierce. A few logistical matters to begin. First, this is the time to silence your cell phones if you've not already done so. And second, after our first conversation or dialogue, there will be an intermission, at which time we welcome you to stretch your legs and use the restrooms downstairs. Please keep your eye on the clock, however. You will not be able to re-enter the building after the second conversation begins at 6:45. We will give you a prompt as the time nears. Third, there will be a reception following our second conversation, and we will give you directions to that reception after intermission. I would like now to introduce Marie Griffith, the John C. Danforth Distinguished Professor in the Humanities at Washington University and a faculty member in the center, who will introduce our first dialogue. From 2011 to 2023, she served as the director of the center and editor of the center's online journal, Religion and Politics. Her research has focused on the changing profiles of American evangelicals and ongoing debates over gender, sexuality, and marriage. Please welcome Professor Marie Griffith.
Thank you, Mark, and greetings to you all. It is a great honor for me to introduce our first panel of speakers. I will do so very briefly since their time with us is short. First, our two exceptionally gifted conversation partners, Joy Harjo and Valeria Luiselli, both widely admired creative writers whose work involves landscapes, migration, displacement, literary and poetic storytelling, and social justice traditions to speak to the injustices of this world and the human capacity for survival. Joy Harjo is the 23rd Poet Laureate of the United States and is a member of the Muskogee Nation. She has taught English, creative writing, and American Indian studies at major universities across the country while performing music and poetry both nationally and internationally. She is the author of 10 highly acclaimed books of poetry, many of them multiple award winners, including her most recent, Weaving Sundown in a Scarlet Light, 50 Poems for 50 Years. Also, An American Sunrise and conflict resolution for holy beings, among many others. She has also written 2 celebrated memoirs, Crazy Brave and Poet Warrior. In addition, she has published 3 award-winning children's books, an anthology of North American Native women's writing, several screenplays, and 3 plays, among many other writings. The recipient of numerous awards and honors, including recent inductions into the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the American Philosophical Society, the National Native American Hall of Fame, and the National Women's Hall of Fame. She lives on the Muskogee Nation Reservation in Oklahoma and is the inaugural artist-in-resident of Tulsa's Bob Dylan Center. Valeria Luiselli was born in Mexico City and grew up in South Korea, South Africa, and India. A renowned writer of both fiction and nonfiction, she is the author of Sidewalks, Faces in the Crowd, The Story of My Teeth, Tell Me How It Ends, an essay in 40 questions, and Lost Children Archive, the first of her novels to be written in English. She is the recipient of a 2019 MacArthur Fellowship and the winner of a Dublin Literary Award, 2 Los Angeles Times Book Prizes, the Carnegie Medal, an American Book Award, and she has been nominated for the National Book Critics Circle Award, the Kirkus Prize, and the Booker Prize. She has been a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree and the recipient of a Bearing Witness Fellowship from the Arts for Justice Fund. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, Granta, and McSweeney's, among other publications, and has been translated into more than 20 languages. She also started a literacy program for girls in a detention center in upstate New York, focused on creative writing. She teaches at Bard College and is a visiting professor at Harvard. We're so happy to have both of you here. We are so fortunate as well to have as our moderator of both this panel and the next one, John Dickerson, whose distinguished and prize-winning career has led him to his current work as anchor of the CBS Daily Report, CBS News political analyst, senior national correspondent, and CBS Sunday Morning contributor. His 3rd book and 2nd New York Times bestseller, The Hardest Job in the World, The American Presidency, was published in 2020. He is also the author of On Her Trail, a book about his famous mother, and Whistle Stop, my favorite stories from presidential campaign history. Just 2 months ago, you may know, it was announced that John will become an anchor of the CBS Evening News in 2025, so we will all greatly look forward to that. He is also a contributing writer to The Atlantic and has both hosted and co-hosted numerous podcasts on presidential history. He has moderated various presidential debates and has served in many other capacities at CBS News since 2009. In fact, he has covered every presidential campaign since 1992, which I happen to know is the year after he graduated from college. In addition to his political work, Dickerson has interviewed a wide range of subjects, including CEOs, actors, authors, and musicians. So we could not have a better person leading both of this evening's discussions. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Joy Harjo, Valeria Luiselli, and John Dickerson.
Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to be here with Valeria and Joy. I'm delighted to be here with all of you, and I'm delighted to be here. I was expecting organ music when we arrived, but the reason I love this space is there's something called the cathedral effect, which is that when you are in spaces like this, I know it's supposed to be non-denominational, but when you are in spaces that are created like this, like cathedrals, it draws out of us elevated thinking. And literally our ideas go up to the rafters, and it creates a collective space for discussion. And so what better environment for what we're going to try to do here tonight than this? So, now that we've got this space, what are we going to do with it? Our conversation is supposed to be in the next hour about new perspectives. So, we're going to try and get as far away from the campaign in the way it's normally talked about as possible, is my goal. Because one of the challenges in our country right now is the entire American experience is sometimes stuffed through the eyes of the campaign, which is not the way it should be. And so I want to start, I'll start, Joy, with you, which is if we can talk about perspective or we can just show people what a different perspective looks like. So I'm going to ask you a very abstract question in the hopes that, because if I'm too precise, it'll smother your answer. When you see America right now, what do you see?
Chaos and beauty. Sometimes I think America was created by a trickster god who thought, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when we do bring, we have an indigenous nation and then we bring all of these other nations in and these people and with very different points of view and cultures, and let's see how they work this out.
And Valeria, what do you see?
Well, first of all, I should say, you say that a space like this elevates our thinking, but it also brings about a lot of Judeo-Christian guilt if you grew up in Catholic schools.
I'm right there with you.
But thanks for your very difficult question. I see a country that is as broken as it is beautiful. I very recently became a U.S. citizen. In fact, I'm voting for the first time in my life. Because I am also a national of Mexico and of Italy, and the voting ballots come in too late. After the election has passed, they arrive. So I've never voted because both Italy and Mexico can't get their act together. Anyway, I'm dodging your question, as you can see, but I will say that I see a country that is rapidly changing and is very afraid of its change. It is a country that is more and more diverse. It is the second largest Spanish-speaking nation in the world, and yet it doesn't conceive itself as a Hispanic nation. There are more Spanish-speaking people in the US than there are in Spain or in Colombia or in Argentina. And yet it doesn't quite see itself that way. It is a country that is full of guilt, but no real, full of guilt for its very brutal colonial past, and yet no clear sense of how to move forward, really, from there. So there's all these sloppy presidential apologies and things like that, but not yet a sense of what we may become as a truly more diverse nation. So what I like to see, I like language. That's the only thing I really like. I mean, I like other things, but that's the only thing I really can see the world through. And the Spanish or the Spanglish or the Ingolonish that I hear in my everyday life in the Bronx where I live is a completely different language from Spanish and from English. And it's already in its adolescence, it's not new. And it's a language that's emerging. And I think it's the language that will be spoken in 200 years. We might not be alive to hear it, but I think it encompasses precisely the merging of the changes that we're seeing.
I love that. So when I asked, what do you see, you actually gave me something you hear.
I hear.
Right? So I was too narrow already when I was trying to be abstract. Joy, one of our challenges in our country, and particularly in art, but artists figured this out before the rest of us were all so distracted all the time, because artists create beauty by being focused in their art. In this moment where we are so distracted and there are so many different parts of the American experience that are noisy and loud, what are you attending to? Where are you spending your attention and your focus in your work and in your work and in terms of what you think is important as you tell stories?
First, I want to say that artists are like the point people of culture. You know, artists go out and they're a little ahead, sensing what's out there in the future, and you don't always just think of it, but it comes through you. And right now, at this point, I'm really centered. You know, I am a mother, I'm a grandmother, I am a great-grandmother, and so much has happened this year that, and it's related to the political landscape, and it's related to climate change, and it's related to the racial, the racial violence that's been going on, because it does come down to the children. It does come down to the kitchen table. It does come down to what is going on in people's intimate lives. And, you know, the women, the mothers are right there at the center of it. We're the ones that, I mean, certainly the fathers are part of it too, but, you know, we're the culture carriers. And that's ultimately where it begins and where it circles back to.
Is with mothers.
Well, I see it through that lens. I've been seeing it through that lens because of, you know, I'm an artist, and as an artist, you work. You don't always know what's coming through, but you take it, you're listening. So you say, it's really being an artist. I think whatever art you're doing, or a politician or a journalist, it's all about listening. Mm-hmm. And it's all about listening with curiosity. So, and without judgment. Because if you listen with judgment, already you've cut the hearing. You know, your hearing may have gone from 100%. You add judgment to it, it goes down to like 5%. That's how it works. And so, you know, it's about listening. And we listen from where we are, in the circle, because ultimately we all make a circle. And so we're listening from where we are. And the center of the world is the circle, you know, is that circle of the Iganajaga, Mother Earth, the mother, the bearer, the carrier of, you know, the stories.
So listening and no judgment.
Yes.
Not two traits that aren't exactly in our politics when we talk about it in that other kind. So we've already discovered a new perspective, which is that you've described two things that we don't normally associate with politics, which is why they're in the realm of art. Valeria, what are you attending to? What is getting the most of your attention these days?
Do we hear a loop, like a bing loop, like a feedback loop? Should I turn off my lapel and then use... Oh my God, I couldn't understand anything. What were you saying?
They're having difficulty hearing you. Are you able to hear the two of us? Okay.
So you're having trouble hearing me? Okay, so maybe if someone turns off my lapel, I try to turn
Valeria's
it off here.
And then she'll do the handheld.
Because just by pressing this, it doesn't seem to turn off.
Yeah, just
it's good.
Yeah.
They've done it.
Here, use this one.
Hello. Okay. Oh, so you missed my entire first answer. It doesn't matter.
It was a great first answer.
It was the only good answer I was going to give. What am I attending to these days? Well, for the past 4 years, now almost 5, I've been working slowly, very, very meticulously on listening and recording the U.S.-Mexico border with a small team of Mexican sound engineers and musicians and myself. And we have traveled the border, I would say, almost millimetrically, recording people and rainstorms and dust storms and coyotes and border patrol and whatever there is along the way. The very big question is, what does the border sound like?
Yeah.
What is one of the most complicated violent borders in the world sound like in the 2000s. And it's a 24-hour sound piece. The reason it's 24 hours is that that's approximately the time it takes to drive from Tijuana, San Diego, to the other extreme of the border moving horizontally in the Gulf of Mexico in Texas. And we've been recording Arizona particularly, and New Mexico, some California, and we're just starting with Texas. Texas is like the PhD of the project because it's so complex. First of all, it's the only part of the U.S. where the U.S. and Mexico where the border is a liquid border, right? It's the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo, and recording in the river is difficult. And we're about to, after this, after St. Louis, I traveled to a very bizarre place called Baghdad Beach, which is in the tip of Texas, almost in the sea, which is where this guy, Elon Musk, does his space launchings. And it's right in the border, so it's like a double border, no? It's the frontier being pushed to the other frontier beyond this earth. And so we're going to record there. What does that sound like? What do the people around there listen to all day, think about? And that's what I've been interested in and continue to be interested in. I'm writing fiction as well, but this sound project and being able to gain much more listening literacy, like understanding how to listen better, has been my great endeavor lately, these years.
Joy, what do you do when you have to listen to somebody who offends every single thing you believe in, right? We can listen. I'm listening to both of you, and I'm gripped. But one of our challenges as humans is still keeping our ears open and our judgment down when it's something we don't want to hear.
I was going to say, I try not to put myself in that position. But some of those people are my relatives. Really. And then with our Muskogee people, which has been called one of the oldest democracies in the world, is that, everyone has a voice. There's an equality. And I think about this, and I think about, what to do, because you cannot change, you cannot force change. You can be, but then there's self-defense. I don't know, I think about it a lot because I believe that most people, and I've had the opportunity because of my work to travel all over the world, and what I have found with people almost everywhere is that most people, they want their home, they want to eat what they want enough food to sit on the table, they like to share with their neighbors, they want to dance, play music, you worship the way they want to, free. And yet what happens, or what's happened in this country, and maybe it was always there, maybe that has something to do with what came down in this country in the first stories, and in order for the country to heal, this polarization, because it was a polarization, a racial disparity that came down in the founding of this country, cultural disparity, that maybe where we are right now is at a place we have to work it out or we'll all go down. But how do you speak to people who don't have ears? I have a piece that kind of speaks to that a little. But how do you move? You talk about listening. And then I think about why don't they, it's like what you were saying, is that they were afraid because the country is not what it was. It's always been, when it was all indigenous nations, it's diverse. A healthy biosphere, a healthy social sphere is one of diversity.
Valeria, when you've been working on this, the work you've been doing at the border, what is your artist intent? Is it to take people somewhere they didn't know they could go to surprise people? Have you been surprised? What was your intent, and what do you hope to, where do you hope to be in the end?
That's a great question. It's changed over the years. I think I went into it with a theory, and slowly, and not so slowly, I've had to drop that. Or I went in with a series of theories, and one of them was like, okay, why is the border such a violent place? I'd been there before many times. My family's from Tijuana, so I'd grown up seeing versions of the wall, etc. But my answer to that question, or my less bitchy answer to that question, was that people must be afraid of something, of the other, whoever the other is, and that is the cause of violence. It's not a fundamental evil in the human spirit, but maybe just fear. And I went into the recordings, especially the recording people, with that in mind. And for example, one of the questions that we would ask along the way, we would stop at an RV park in front of the wall and ask the retired school teacher veteran who run the place, what are you afraid of? And we'd get answers from nothing to being ambushed by a narco to this flock of people coming in. Many women answering, "I'm not afraid of anything," interestingly. But then, with time, we realized that the question itself, and you're a journalist, you must know this, was so leading,
yeah.
right? And it really directed the conversation around the border along one track. And so we stopped asking that altogether for now. And one of the questions I enjoy asking most is, can you describe your land? And so what I think has been building very slowly is almost like this tapestry of descriptions of landscape. And, we have this passionate description of a copper mine, which I see as the most horrific, sort of violent intrusion on the earth. But there's this copper miner, not a miner, but a miner, a copper miner who describes this concentric spiral a hole leading into this pool of black water with such passion and beauty that, it's part of the description of this land and this landscape. So that has surprised me enormously. And now I think I'm more out to collect that kind of sound mark.
When you collect that kind of passionate feeling about where people live and how deeply they feel about it, does that end up leading you to understanding why they're afraid? In other words, they think it might go away. By asking that question, did you bank shot into the answer that you were seeking when you asked what were they afraid of?
Not yet. Maybe in the future.
Joy, do you have any questions that you're working through in your work, or that you are trying to get answers to? And some of them, you might have carried them for 30 years, that you find your work revolves around, about this country, about its many different parts?
I think at this point, I'm at a point, like the last book I brought out was 50 poems in 50 years. And you realize that you kind of work around the same questions. They might take a different shape, or a different shape or a different angle, but I realized that my life has really been about justice and also about transformation. One of my early poems, I tried to turn hatred into love, thinking, okay, this is what I want my poetry to do, or words. And I go to poetry, because I also write other things, but I go to poetry because poetry is able to go into those places that are often wordless. Places where you have no words to speak what you are attempting to speak.
When you do that, this is a craft question now. When you're writing a poem, are you leaving space for the reader to come in? Because, as you say, poems are not prose, so it's not A, B, and C. It's do you consciously, in the creative process, create sort of the conditions for a reader to then experience something in the space? What I'm trying to get at here is, in my business, we say the following three things happened, and people may or may not kind of understand it. A poem is so much more powerful because as they read the poem and come to realize what you're writing, they start to inhabit the work itself. And that's so much more deeply felt than if they just have information wash over them. Is that something that you consciously try to construct, that environment where people inhabit the poem?
I think that's just the nature of poetry itself. It's much different than, prose or journalistic writing, in that it's like other kinds of writing, you move in a trajectory like this, but in poetry, it feels to me like you're moving in concentric circles towards a center where you can find yourself. You can find yourself. People go to poetry because they need some way to speak of grief, or they need some way to speak of awe, or they need some way to speak of love. I think probably 99% of the poems and songs in the world are about finding love and then losing it and finding it again. And they need some way to speak what's ineffable, or what is beyond ordinary language. I think that's why I went. So of course, the audience is there. I mean, that's always part of it. In a performance, and writing is a kind of performance, or what we do. It's there is no poem without the listener. There is no poem without, and when you're writing writing music or anything, or creating theory or anything, you're listening. And so I feel like when I'm in that creative space, I'm in a call and response with what? What am I in call and response with? Well, it could be a particular place because it's very alive and living. It could be a river, like, you've spoken. The river has a voice. In some places the river is a citizen. It could be somebody in your past, and you can hear their voice, or someplace in history where history rises up, or the figures rise up, and there you are in a conversation in a language that you have to follow. And then they're like you're a journalist, then their revisions follow. Yeah.
I love the theme we keep coming back to, which is listening and hearing things perhaps from different places that we weren't expecting, which is sort of the theory of this entire conversation we're having. Valeria, you have written both in fiction and in straight-up fact. How do they play with each other in the work that you do? When do you choose to do one or the other? And when is one so much better than the other?
That's a great question. But I want to circle back quickly to your previous question, because it was a very generous question, and I gave you a very ungenerous answer, because I hadn't really thought about it, but I had some time to think. And I think I can tell you one thing. You asked if by asking the question about landscape, I was able to understand the question about fear a little more. And I think that one thing is clear to me, and that the biggest fear that people have is a kind of fear for the future, in a way that I don't think in other decades growing up I had such a sense of fear of the future, as much as this younger generation has a sense of futurelessness. And so when people speak about what they fear along the interviews and conversations we have, it is always about the imminent lack of water, about the way that the youth is not integrating fully to life, but somewhere deep in the intricacies of the internet and that realm, people speak about just not knowing what's going to happen. And I think we are living in a moment where we have a very deep sense of future, of imminent future, but also a futurelessness that has us in a very bizarre relationship to time. Like time feels very differently right now. I don't know exactly when it changed, but there is a sense that time has changed. Something in the fabric of time has changed, and that has been a difficult discovery or realization. And then very quickly, to answer your question about fiction and nonfiction, I have the problem that I never know when I begin writing a book, I never know if it's going to be in Spanish or in English, or if it's going to be fiction or nonfiction. And every time I sit down to write a book, I feel like I've forgotten completely how to write a book. And so
That's very comforting to hear.
That's good. That's good, though, because you're, in a way.
I mean, in a way, I guess it's
Yes.
good because it keeps me excited about my work. It doesn't ever bore me. I don't think that I am necessarily very disciplined. So what really keeps me going is the flame of enthusiasm, and that flame is always ignited by not knowing and by discovering and by not knowing what's going to come. So I have to write for a long time, notes, and listen and take photos and make notes and record people and do all I do in my writing process before I know if something is fiction or nonfiction. And there is a moment, eventually it comes, where something says to me, this is absolutely not fiction, or this has to be a novel, or whatever it is, or this has to be in Spanish, or sometimes this has to be in both Spanish and English.
And I'll ask a question to which I think I already know the answer, but how do you know when that moment happens?
Well, when it begins to flow.
Yeah.
Where I'm not stuck. But often I'm stuck because whoever's written anything gets stuck. And one thing that works for me sometimes is precisely when I write the book I'm writing now, one of the books I'm writing now, it's a short essay called, for now, Sometimes and Across. And I started writing it in English and it didn't work, so I tried it in Spanish and it worked. And then I got stuck, so I translated everything I'd written in Spanish into English, and then I was able to advance like one more mile. And then I retranslated that in Spanish, and it's like a relay race, Spanish and English, that's allowing me to think in both languages and then think a little better and more clearly.
The reason I'm so interested in the way you both do your work, in the way you hear, and the way you see, and the way you turn ideas to get them to touch what you're feeling, is that we're talking about different perspectives, and so much of our public conversation around politics and American life feels so inert, so dead, where even the great speeches don't happen anymore. And so art, which seeks so hard and patiently and intentionally to find a truth, turning it between different languages, between fiction and nonfiction, asking questions your whole life, is all about trying to get at these harder questions. And so you do for a living what is so bereft in kind of our public sphere. Joy, I saw you writing down something earlier.
Yes, it was playing off what you were saying earlier, and I was thinking about time and how time has changed and about the time we're in, and it occurred to me because, I've been in what is called the dark night of the soul. I lost a daughter. And, I've learned, I've been through grief, we lose people. But I've been in that space, and yet I'm starting to move about a little. But I began to realize that not only have I been personally in a dark night of the soul, this country is in a dark night of the soul. And this Earth Mother is also in a dark night of the soul. Now, there's always a gift in something in the challenge. I think, okay, what am I learning? That's important. Whatever you're doing, even in the thick of ugliness, is okay. It's important to stop and think about it with curiosity, again, without judgment. Thinking, okay, this is what I'm learning. This is what I will take. I can use this for, to build understanding, and for the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, because in our Muskogee traditions and a lot of the indigenous traditions, we're told that all of the children are our children. All of the grandchildren are our grandchildren. you know, and I think that's the children of the plants too, and the animals and so on. And so if you think that, so I think, okay, here we all are, and time changes when you're in that kind of space. It's like right now we're kind of slowed down and everybody, okay, let's see what's going to happen. But if you look at the way time works, it already has happened, it's happening, it will happen. And so I don't have an answer, you know, or a clear way, because that will be my next book. That will be, I've been taking notes like you. I take notes, I listen, and make songs and so on, because I'm listening. I don't know where it's going yet, except they're all connected. The way, you know, with the earth, with daughters, with mothers, with this country. Because the country is a body, it's a person. We call it a body politic. It's a person. And so it's all, in a way, one. So it's all connected. But what happens, you move the dark of the night, dark night of the soul is not forever.
It strikes me that, Valeria, what you were describing about what people fear is the uncertainty. And both of you have just talked about a writing process that is all about uncertainty.
True.
That uncertainty, when Valeria was talking about being uncertain, not knowing where it was going, you kept saying, that's good, that's how you know. So maybe that's one of the differences between artists and civilians, for lack of a better word, is being comfortable in the uncertainty.
I mean, we're not comfortable.
No?
Sure.
We suffer.
No, yes, exactly. Type 2 fun. It's fun when it's over. Yeah.
But you said something really great about the inert language of the political arena. And can I ask you a question, or is that not allowed in the?
Yeah.
Just quickly.
Unless I
Just
have
very
no
quickly.
answer, in which case
very-
it's not
a very-
allowed.
It's a
wondering
question
that
in
too.
the realm of fiction. It's like, what if? Like, do you think if someone had taken Trump when he was younger and had him read Plato and St. John the Divine, St. John of the Cross,
Yes,
I'm sorry.
St. John of the Cross.
St. John of the Cross, and he had a moment of empathy and of, you know, that thing that one feels when you understand a line of a poem and suddenly it reveals itself to you. Would he not be like a gardener now, or a teacher, or like, would it have changed?
The writer.
Yeah. Well, the poem would have had to work on him, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who read poetry and it does nothing for them, and they read fiction and it does nothing for them, and they never do good for the rest of their lives. And I've often wondered about this, which is, can't you see the beauty in this? Why isn't everybody, you know, reading Blake all day long? Because a lot of people don't like it. And so they find us as foreign as we might find them when they're interested in something else. So he would have had to have read it and been captivated by finding empathy and being drawn into the empathetic response to whatever he was reading about. In that case, I don't, you know, would that have ever led him to the political class? I don't know, but, and then I'll shut up. One of the definitions of public character, James Wilson, who was a political scientist, said that character is not how you behave personally or any of that foolishness. As the character of a leader is defined by two things. One is being able to see future consequences and not just be wholly presently focused. You have to recognize that you are leading a country and that there are generations after you. The second thing is empathy. You need to be able to understand all of those people who didn't vote for you, all of those people whose experiences you've never been a part of, but who the power of government can assist through its work or assist by getting out of the way. So empathy, whether you get it through poetry or otherwise, is crucial to leadership. So I hope I've ducked the question sufficiently while also giving an answer that I think is also true. Joy, can I ask you about hope? Because you talked about the dark night of the soul. Where did you find hope in your own personal, and since you drew the connection between your personal experience and the country, do you see a connection between where people who look at our current moment and feel hopeless can find hope?
I find it in young people. I travel about the country. I was just in a music performance with a whole band up in Door County, Wisconsin. And I travel about, and it's the young people and the younger people who come up. You know, people say, well, Westworld, you know, it's like what we've all run into with younger people saying, what are we going to do? The economy's wrecked. We can't even buy a house. All of this, but you can see it in they're carrying it with them. I see it. There's a whole group of 2-year-olds that are amazing. I know, just watching them, because at this age, I have seen different generations come up, and every generation has a different characteristic. They might be, and that's for across all cultures, they come in with a characteristic. It's like a person, a generational person. And so I'm watching this, and I'm watching these, and I think, wow, that's where I have hope. Although I'm suspicious of the word hope, because it sounds like we're not doing anything, we're just hoping, or, making, sandcastles or something. But I see it in these waves of young people who, they ask these questions, and even the ones who seem, the generations right now that seem kind of lost in a vision on a screen that doesn't include them. They're still, there's a spark. Everybody was given a spark, and they're part of the story, and they're carrying an important part of the story. But I see it in the young people coming up, that they're carrying something. They're not quite sure how to move with it, but they're quite incredible. They come up, they're thinking about things, they're working on something. They might be lost, but there's always a point in lost. With lost, there's always found. That's the way it works in this world of polarity.
Let me pick up on your point about hope, that it can feel like hope without action.
Yeah.
But what you've both described, and I'll just ask this, maybe shoot this down, Valeria, if it's wrong. When you described your writing process, when you both described, isn't it hope? Isn't the artist's hope active hope? You don't know where you're going, but you hope that through your craft you'll get there. So it's hope, because if it wasn't hope, you wouldn't keep going. But it's not actionless. You're writing, you're thinking, you're suffering. But isn't hope what drives you, what allows you to keep going?
No, it's belief. It's love, or what we call anagechka. It's belief in a certain sense of love, knowing that ultimately there's a reason. Ultimately, that everyone was created with love. We make our choices because we were all given, even if we're in prison, we have a choice of what we're going to do even in that moment, whether we're going to beat ourselves against the wall, we're going to work out, or we all have. So I think it's more like belief and that listening and open and belief and love, that on what we call anagechka, that sense of connection and love, knowing that ultimately in all of this there is a meaning, and that root meaning connects absolutely all life, not just two-legged humans, but all life in this universe.
Valeria, you were with young kids as a translator, right? Kids in detention? Did you see hope there, and where did they find hope in those desperate circumstances?
But let me circle back to the question, part A of the question, about hope. Although at the beginning I was hoping you didn't ask me about hope. But
we're going to have a big diet of hope, so it's not going to end here.
I know. Listening to Joy, I was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense to me more. So, like, hope in the arena of political, what political climate feels to me more like, cautious optimism, or that's what hope feels like to me when I think about something in the political climate.
Say that again. It feels like
cautious optimism at best.
Right.
I wouldn't say I have hope. I have cautious optimism sometimes about how things might play out. Mm-hmm. Then in the experience of writing, you were asking, isn't it hope that kind of guides you? No, that's kind of like wishful thinking that guides you, that you're going to get somewhere even though you don't know how. But ultimately, what the motor is, and here I completely agree with Joy, is you're calling it love, Joy. I would call it love, but also a fundamental vitality right? A sense that you want to be here in this world, that it makes sense, that there is something like meaning, something like purpose, something that simply connects you profoundly to the love of life. And that does drive me. And that sometimes plays out like anger at injustice, or it plays out like a combination of anger and the need to search for clarity, therefore the need to write in search for that clarity. But I don't think it's hope. Maybe hope is reserved for those who are lucky enough to believe in a greater power. I don't know. Or those of you who are religious, would you say you hope? I don't know.
Well, Thomas Merton said, through hope, faith is made real. So you have a faith that there is that God, and then you hope that's true, and that's what drives your action. So it may in the end be a semantic thing, that we may be saying belief and hope may, for a variety of different reasons, mean the same kind of thing to ourselves. But can't you have hope in yourself? When you're writing that belief that you have it's going to turn out okay, you have hope in yourself. You have hope it's going to turn out, you have faith in yourself. Yeah. But tell me about the migrant kids.
Yes. Well, I think I had a very, very astonishing experience once in a creative writing workshop that I created in a detention center. I'll try to be as brief as possible telling the story. I came in not knowing what to expect and very naively brought a bunch of Quixote editions, and that didn't work out. Nobody was interested in the Quixote. And then we started doing writing exercises created by the Oulipo. So things like, write a short biography of yourself without using the letter E. And so it's always funny what comes up, because a student, instead of writing, I am a student, will write something like, I am a girl in an institution. And these little constraints, exercises with constraints, start showing students how what seems like an obstacle is often the cause for better writing, right? So circumnavigation leads to discovery. And so we did a series of these exercises for some months, and the girls at some point got very excited, started writing more in their journals, and eventually got into trouble with the staff in the detention center because they're writing too much, or things that I don't know, of course they were surveilled all the time. So we stopped doing journals, and we started doing a fanzine, a collective fanzine, where each of them chose a name from something in nature. So they were like conejito, terremoto, lluvia. And we put together this fanzine where the girls mostly wrote about the environmental devastation of their homelands, fundamentally due to Canadian, American, and Chinese mines who set themselves along the rivers of Guatemala, Honduras, and destroy the land, and therefore there is this big migration from the countryside to the cities, and eventually from the cities to the US, because the cities are violent and overpopulated. That's the main chain of migration of children and adolescents, comes from this cycle of destruction. And so they wrote their fanzines about all this, and what was beautiful, and this is the end of the story, what was beautiful was that we asked them to dedicate the fanzine in a kind of prologue to whoever they wanted to. And we, when I say we, it was my niece and I working here, we thought they were going to dedicate this fanzine maybe to their families back home or to friends, but no. They dedicated this fanzine to future girls in their same situation, locked up in a detention center, saying, I salute you, sister. You are here because you're brave. Don't forget, you will get out one day. It was this beautiful, I still get goosebumps every time I think about it, this beautiful letter to future girls. Not future as in 100 years from now, but the girls that were going to come in inevitably in the next months or years in that detention center. And that's where I thought, oh my God, writing, and it's taken me my entire life to figure out that writing is something that you don't only do for your community, But these girls had understood that it's something that you do to form a community. And I have never thought of writing the same way since that.
Story. You wrote down something, Joy. Were you prompted to?
Well, I started thinking about the time I went to Wind River Reservation. They were having suicides, young people, the youth. It was unprecedented, and it was making even the national news, which Native news often doesn't. But it was making national news, so they brought me in to teach them poetry. And it was quite amazing. They were wonderful. They were lively. And it was an incredible experience. But, you know, because, and they did art. I was thinking about that.
Yeah. I want to see if we can take a listen to a little of both of your work before we're done. Did you have something you wanted to read that you're either working on, Joy, or that, well, just anything you want to read?
Yes, I'll read, oh man. Now that I haven't, this is a manuscript. No, I'm not going to read this whole thing. But it's called What You Said. It's interesting. I think sometimes a part of you gets locked in a time, and adolescence for girls can be intense, even if you're, in detention. It's such a potent, powerful time, that transformational time becoming from a child to an adult, and it's fraught. And this book is written really just like those girls said. It's called Girl Warrior, and it's pieces written to those girls coming up, so that they'll make it through. When you said that gave me chills. It's like, that's kind of what this is. That girl or those friends I lost, or that, it's that same calling out to kind of say, okay, you will live because I have lived, and I'm living, and I'm telling a story. But what I was going to read, I think I'll still read this because it kind of touches on everything. This is a piece, and then I'm going to read this poem that goes with it. I'll just read this because then I'll start explaining too much. Because this was written when my daughter was pregnant with one of my granddaughters, and I was living in New Mexico, and there was a story going around. Okay, I already say this. I'll read it. When my third granddaughter's body was forming, I watched and listened to what was going on in the atmosphere to find a clue about this incoming family member, what she would need once she arrived here to take on her part of the story. A powerful story was making the rounds in the Native community where I was living in New Mexico. There was a Navajo woman of a righteous nature who lived far out on the reservation in a hogan, the traditional home of the Navajo or Dene people there. She still prayed every morning with cornmeal, tended the altars of the living, took care of her sheep, and was loved and well respected by her relatives and neighbors. She was also blind. She was visited one day by the holy ones. As her hogan filled with the powerful presence of sacredness, the holy ones told her, as they towered over her, that they had come to give a warning to the people. We are nearing times when we will experience earth changes, famine, and strife because people are forgetting their original teachings. The holy ones instructed her to tell everyone to keep hold of their traditional ways, which meant attending to prayer and minding their attention in all things, or listening, because it matters for the outcome of the people, for all life forms of this earth. Without it, we will suffer. The traditional ways and rituals of all Earth's peoples are kept in containers of poetry, song, and story. It's how we know who we are, where we are coming from, and who we are becoming. I knew that my granddaughter was bringing in special gifts that would assist with these times we were moving into, times in which we are reckoning with our lack of respect and attention to what matters in this place. I told this at a performance in Flagstaff, Arizona, near one of the sacred mountains. Many of the Dene people there nodded their heads in remembering. For holy ones to touch down in that manner is powerful and dangerous. Everyone must pay attention. Afterward, one of the women came up to me and remarked, I saw the footprints of the holy ones in the sand in front of the hogan. They were very long and narrow. The times the Holy Ones speak of, we are in now. In this time at the crossroads of brokenness, we are watching and listening for what stories will nourish us. At this cliff edge of becoming, there will be no turning back. And then I go into talking about tricksters. These are times that invite tricksters who disturb the waters. And sometimes we even find a trickster in the seat of power. They inhabit, we've always had clowns and tricksters, they inhabit the power places because their role is to remind us that though we may hold and even wield power, power does not belong to us. It is meant to be shared. And then this trickster poem that has everything to do with elections and politics. Rabbit is the trickster for the Muskogee people. In a world long before this one, there was enough for everyone until somebody got out of line. We heard it was Rabbit fooling around with clay in the wind. Everybody was tired of his tricks and no one would play with him, and he was lonely in this world. So Rabbit thought to make a person. And when he blew into the mouth of that crude figure to see what would happen, the clay man stood up. Rabbit showed the clay man how to steal a chicken. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal corn. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal someone else's wife, and that clay man obeyed. Rabbit felt important and powerful, and clay man felt important and powerful. And once that clay man started, he could not stop. Once he took that chicken, he wanted all the chickens. Once he took that corn, he wanted all the corn. And once he took that wife, he wanted all the wives. He was insatiable. Then he had a taste of gold. He wanted all the gold. Soon it was trade or anything else he saw. His wanting only made him want more. Soon it was countries. Then it was trade. The wanting infected the earth. We lost track of the purpose and meaning of life. We began to forget our songs, our stories. We could no longer see or hear our ancestors or talk with each other across the kitchen table. Forests were being mowed down all over the world to make more, and Rabbit had no place left to play. Rabbit's trick had backfired. Rabbit tried to call that clay man back, but when the clay man wouldn't listen, Rabbit realized he'd made a clay man with no ears.
Valeria, are you up for reading, or?
I think that after listening to Joy, that's where we leave it. You can only go down from there. So
No, that's not true.
Let me ask you this question then, Valeria. Do you seek in the work that you do to describe things as they are and let people have their judgments? Or do you hope to bring people to an understanding of the way things ought to be?
Here it's basically, this is an iteration of your question about fiction, writing fiction and writing nonfiction, I think. When I started writing my latest novel, Lost Children Archive, I was also working as a volunteer interpreter in court, in New York Immigration Court, translating children's testimonies in order to find lawyers who would defend them against deportation orders. This is during the height of the diaspora crisis, called the immigration crisis, and that was in 2014, 2015. And I was writing Lost Children Archive, and as fiction writers, unfortunately, what we do is everything becomes part of the fiction. You swallow life in this tremendously greedy way, and just sort of put it in the machinery of fiction and then transform it. And so what I was doing also to even just cope with and understand the things that I was hearing in court was coming back home and fictionalizing those testimonies and trying to weave them into this novel, until I realized I am majorly fucking this up. And both because I was not doing any justice to the novel by trying to transform it into some kind of news eye, right? An eye that was keeping up with reality as it was happening, denouncing it. And I was not doing any justice to the situation, which was this tremendous emergency unfolding that I was treating through some weird fictional mechanisms. So I stopped writing the novel completely. I wrote a small book called Tell Me How It Ends, which is a very short, brief, direct testimony of what I saw in court in those years. And that book was very much driven by a sense of what this is, but what this ought to be as well, right? The book is structured around the questionnaire that children are asked, starting with the question, why did you come to the United States? And so it reveals, or hopes to reveal, I use the word hope for the first time.
I knew you did. I wasn't going to point it out, but there you did. You are a slave to hope now, yes.
It hopes to reveal not so much, I mean, of course the stories of where the children come from, why they left, etc., but more than anything, to also offer really as kind of x-ray of the U.S. immigration system and how it works. So I was interested in that. And then fiction is a space for something else. It's not for ought to be, it's not for is, it's just completely, it's a parallel form of telling. I think it gets to deeper truths than nonfiction, because it touches us at emotional levels like poetry does by simply sort of, I'm losing the word in English, by...
Use the word that's in your head.
no, it's all a jumble. Basically, by allowing us to, I'm going to walk out of here and say that was the word, by allowing us access to very deep places in ourselves through slivers of the lives of others. Imagine the word I was looking for. I don't think it actually exists. I was trying to say that. Accessing deep truths of ourselves through slivers of the lives of others. And that you cannot do really, really with any other thing that is not poetry or fiction.
As we come towards the end here, I want to ask you both. We are at an institution of higher learning. Thinking back on my time in college, I could have used something that gave me hope, because it's not just the political world. It's just what are you going to go do, and particularly if you go into a life of the arts, who knows if it's going to work out. So whatever life they choose, the students here, what should they learn or know, or how should they equip themselves? Maybe in some small way or in a large way.
That's what this new book, Girl Warrior, is really about. But really it's about learning how to know yourself and to listen. I mean, when you decide to become a poet, I got into school based, in pre-med. I had all kinds of people wanting to help me because it was seen as, it's actual. There's something going to come out of it. I changed my major within the next semester back to art, studio art. Okay, well, there's a lot of Native artists. I had Native artists in my family. It was a seen trajectory, but when I changed it to poetry, and I was a young mother with 2 children, that made no sense at all, economically. You don't see, poetry at career day. But it was something that utterly moved me. And I truly believe that everyone came in with gifts. For my brother, it was vehicles, cars. Everyone has something. And it's important to follow that, but you may not. It's important to know what that is and to follow it and to take care of it, take care of what was given to you to do. And sometimes it takes a while to know that. But I think it's important to take that opportunity you have in college to be curious and to study and to experience the lives of friends and others and ideas. I mean, that's what an institution of higher learning is it's an opportunity to be in a place with others, to study and to help do what we were all put here to do, is to reimagine the world. That was something given to everyone to do. To everyone.
So if we're talking about new perspectives, this is the place you learn how to be intentional about reimagining the world, how to be finding new perspectives. Because once you get out there, you're only allowed to have one perspective.
Yeah, really. Yeah, but there's different kinds of universities. There's the University of the Kitchen Table. Yeah.
Right.
There's the University of, other cultures. There's other, institutions of higher learning. I remember when I was teaching at the University of Arizona, I made friends with, he was a graduate student in post-colonial literature, British literature, and he was from Ghana, and his university, his teaching before that, and I always loved this, was to be a master drummer. And so his university was to go out and listen, and he would have to come in the late afternoon and show his teacher the rhythms he had learned, what he had learned from being out in the world. So it's institutions like this one, but there are also other, quote, institutions of learning. Yeah.
Same question to you.
I remembered the word. It was a very simple word. It was seduction. In nonfiction or political discourse or even journalism wins by convincing, right? And that's the tradition of rhetoric, is to convince. But fiction and poetry win by seduction, which is a very different game. It's more a dance. It's between two people. It's an invitation. It's an art of distance. And
it lures.
It lures, then it hides a little bit, then it... And that is something that you can really, I think, only do through fiction and poetry. I'm not trying to equate fiction to poetry. I know that poetry is a little bit higher up, but we're nearby.
Yeah.
We're good cousins of the poets.
But as the last question, what would you, if you had advice to give about being intentional about bringing the kind of perspective to the world that we've been talking about? What would you do if you were in college, or what advice would you give?
I would say don't lose pleasure in your craft, whatever it is that you do and that you study, because whenever you disconnect from the pleasure of doing, there doesn't seem to be much sense in life anymore. Whatever you do, don't let too much time being taken from you, too many things to crowd your space, so that you can really fully engage with real pleasure in the things that you do.
Well, it's been a great pleasure talking to both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.